which are known to you by the political metaphor, United States. And of course, most of you who already are aware and who are cognate of the political platforms operating at Midgard Earth are aware that the United States Corporation is a British colony and still is. And due to the fact that many of the people have been presented with the misconception that the United States Corporation Company, registered in Austria, thinking that it is the country relative to the aggregate soil or land operating at central part of North America, that is in fact not true, and is part of the mind control systems and operations that have been going on, particularly since 1861, after the assassination of Abraham Lincoln, and 1871, February the 2nd, which you all know, when the coup d'etat operatives came out of the closet with their political platform dealing or constructed under the Ku Klux Klan, which is known as the Democratic Party, and what is also known as the Demo platform, etc., contrary to and repugnant to the Constitution for the United States, and repugnant to the obligations to all the treaties superseding the Constitution for the United States that operates on the land, the aggregate land for the true American peoples, etc., sometimes connotatively referred to as the indigenous people, Aboriginal people, and also connotatively referred to as Indians, but in fact are actually the descendants of the land of the ancient Canaanites, Moabites, in short, Moors. But I want to share with you conceptually some facts so that we can continue in our ongoing activities of the natural people of the land reclaiming their lost estate on multiple levels. And of course, most of you are already aware that the principle of a state expands far beyond what the average natural people have been taught to think that it is, and of course, lacking knowledge of what it actually means extensively and lawfully, including recognition of the denied or suppressed legal processes relative to getting back to the lawful status of the people. We're going to go in the future, we'll be dealing more in depth. Myself and Dr. G have been conversing with some of these things in this past week. And of course, we've had many people call from around the country and from around the continent and from other parts of America in reference to these matters. This is one of the reasons why we're reviewing or regurgitating some of the facts in relationship to the bottomry instruments, and one which we mentioned in our presentment title, marriage license, which is really a bond, etc. And by most people not being aware of the fact that it's actually a bond traded on the stock market, etc., and being under the misconception that it is a divine instrument related to the honorable beauty and innocence of matrimony in the face of our creators and our mothers and fathers and our forefathers, etc., in honor of which the marriage certificate absolutely is not. Unfortunately, many of the people not knowing that it is a corporate state contract that intercedes with the divine nature of the mating of male and female in harmony with divine laws of nature, and is actually more akin to and more aligned with human trafficking and sales. And of course, most people are not aware of the fact that the marriage license was constructed mainly by the Daughters of the American Revolution. So write this down. The marriage license was constructed by the Daughters of the American Revolution for the Bishopric of Rome in relationship to their operative mercenary contractual operations for the popes of Rome, who are indeed the Vatican Order and the owners of the United States Corporation Company. And via spaces misrepresented to other obligations, duties, debts, and what you would call abandonments of rights and liberties that are not said or spoken. Say, for instance, a member of the clergy would say to participants in the bodily instrument known as a marriage license, and they will make statements along this line. And remember this as you hear this statement. By the power vested in me by the state of Delaware, I pronounce you man and wife. You'll hear those statements according to the corporate state that the people may be operating in those particular jurisdictions. And keep in mind that those particular jurisdictions are abstracts on paper connected to and related to corporate entities, constructs on paper, having nothing at all to do with the aggregate land, L-A-N-D, the aggregate soil, having nothing whatsoever to do with the aggregate soil. And so it's important for people to have a concept, a true concept of jurisdictional placements distinguished from organic land placements or geographic territorial placements. From a political perspective and fact and reality, it's also vital that the people are very clear to make the distinction between, as an example, the political metaphor, as an example, state of Delaware, state of Pennsylvania, state of New Jersey, distinguished from the political metaphor, Delaware State Republic, Pennsylvania State Commonwealth, New Jersey State Republic. So when you hear Pennsylvania State Commonwealth, that is a political metaphor that relates to the legitimate operations by treaty and constitution on the aggregate land, distinguished from human trafficking operations by corporate venues via state of Pennsylvania, etc., or state of Delaware, or state of New Jersey, or any of the states of entity constructs that have been operate jurisdictionally, exercising civil jurisdictional powers de facto on the land, particularly since 1861, and particularly more distinctly since 1871, February 2nd, dealing with what is known as the U.S. democracy also. I would like to share with you, for those of you who didn't or it never dawned on you, why clergy members, when they exercise the bottomry instrument, which they are what you would call a third party facet operative, actually a fourth party operative, or you might call an interloper operative in the operations. And this would be known as their true oath. Now, the concepts that most people would have, that when the sectal member of the clergy says, by the power vested in me by the state of Delaware, I pronounce you man and wife. It does not dawn on the average person because they're usually concerned or involved with going through the beauty of the ceremony, all of the finance that is spent, all of the happy people and family members that are around, and they're waiting for the reception, etc., and they're not paying attention to the details of what is stated. So when the clergy member of the Roman Curia says, by the power vested in me by the state of Delaware, I pronounce you man and wife, it doesn't dawn on the participants that matrimonial contract power is vested by the corporate state, having nothing to do with the divine creator, Allah, Yahweh, Parabrahms, the Buddha, etc., Confucius, or any of the divine images or the metaphors or the anthropomorphic positions of the prophets or Prophet Muhammad, etc., etc., that people may use in their different religious positions. There's an assumption that it is a pathway to what we would refer to as the divine, the creator, Allah, God, etc., those concepts. And of course, they need to be aware of the fact that while the people in general are trained from childhood to assume that when the clergy says the word God, that they're making reference to the creator or the source of life for all of us, etc., when in fact they're actually talking about the vested power of the owners of the corporate state that vest their power by delegation of the bishopric via this Roman curia member who would hold the role of the man of the cloth, etc. And so I will share with you from the congressional records, because remember, even these people that you have assumed were just political heads, quote unquote, representing people or the land. Actually, they're representatives for the corporate operations of the popes of Rome through the bishopric order and through the United States Corporation Company, the states of political construct jurisdictions, and the municipalities, townships, and boroughs under admiralty, maritime, etc., rules of booty and prize. And so the bottomry instrument known as the marriage license would come under the secret oath of the clergy to the popes of Rome. And I'll share with you what most of you are already aware of, but however, for those of you who are not aware of this, I will share with you this for you to also recognize the connection, actual and factual, between the clergy that you thought loved Jesus, God, Allah, etc., and the popes of Rome, etc., contrary to what has been told to you, i.e., and this would also show you the misrepresentation of their positions with the people at large, as well as their misrepresentations of themselves and the operations of these contractual adhesion instrumentalities known as bottomry instruments, which would include the marriage certificates and birth certificates, etc., and driver's licenses, etc. So I'll share with you and do your own research. This will be available to you for those of you who have libraries, which you should have. You can do this research in your own library, and you can also go into the congressional records for the United States Corporation Company and find this document yourself. And those of you who over the last year or two have acquired the study drive, flash drive from Dr. Naila in the House of Reawakening Minds, you would have this congressional record from the Senate on that flash drive, and it is known as the Secret Treaty of Verona. And so many of you are already aware of this, but for those of you who are not aware, and who have been participating with instrumentalities from the corporate state to know the truth about what is happening with you, with your estate, in relationship to these people that you assumed that were dealing with you in honor, and they actually were not dealing with you in honor, never were, and are not. So I'm going to go from the congressional records registered in the House of Representatives, the congressional record, and the Senate extract from the 1916 operations of the corporation operations for the United States Corporation Company. Senator Owen, I wish to put in the record the secret Treaty of Verona, quote unquote, of November 22nd, 1822, showing what the ancient conflict is between the rule of the few and the rule of the many. I wish to call the attention of the Senate to this treaty because it is the threat of this treaty which was the basis of the quote-unquote Monroe Doctrine. It throws a powerful white light upon the conflict between monarchical government and government by the people. The Holy Alliance, under the influence of Metternich, the Premier of Austria, in 1822, issued this remarkable secret document, Secret Treaty of Verona. Now, note, you all, that the treaty has 7 sections, but I'm going to read up until Article 3 for the sake of our presentment tonight. Secret Treaty of Verona, American Diplomatic Code, 1778 to 1884, Volume 2, Elliott, page 179. The undersigned specially authorized to make some additions to the Treaty of the Holy Alliance after having exchanged their respective credentials, have agreed as follows. Article 1. The high contracting powers, being convinced that the system of representative government is equally as incompatible with the monarchical principles as the maxim of the sovereignty of the people with the divine right, engage mutually in the most solemn manner to use all that their efforts to put an end to the system of representative governments in whatever country it may exist in Europe, and to prevent it being introduced to those countries where it is not yet known. Article 2. As it cannot be doubted that the liberty of the press is the most powerful means used by the pretended supporters of the rights of nations to the detriment of those princes, the high contracting parties promise reciprocally to adopt all proper measures to suppress it, not only in their own states, but also in the rest of Europe. Article 3, and pay close attention to Article 3, because this is the oath that all the clergy that have been telling you, by the power vested in me by the state of Delaware, I do pronounce you man and wife, etc. This is their oath. It's not to Allah, it's not to Prophet Muhammad, it's not to Yeshua, it's not to the Jesus image, it is not to any of the prophets, it is not to anything divine, it is to the popes of Rome. Hear the following. Article 3, Secret Treaty of Verona, Oath of the Clergies. Convinced that the principles of religion contribute most powerfully to keep nations in the state of passive obedience which they owe to their princes. The high contracting parties declare it to be their intention to sustain in their respective states those measures which the clergy may adopt with the aim of ameliorating their own interests, intimately connected with the preservation of the authority of the princes and the contracting powers, join in offering their thanks to the Pope for what he has already done for them, and solicit his constant cooperation in their views of submitting the nations. That's Article 3, and that's the secret oath that the clergy have to the popes of Rome while going in houses that they told you are houses of God and have been promoting Jesus and the other prophets to the face of the people, but in secret, their pledge and their allegiance and their fidelity is pledged to the Pope of Rome, and they themselves are secret clergy members of the bishopric of Rome. That goes for the Eastern churches, the Orthodox churches, and the Protestant churches. This is why you hear them make this statement. By the power vested in me by the state of Delaware, I pronounce you man and wife.